Hi all, I just wanted to pop on and do a short video on Saturn because I was sharing some information from other astrologers who have been doing YouTube videos about Saturn, other really great astrologers, that's Molly McCord for example, and I thought to myself, I know a lot about this, so I can share my own experiences and my own information, my own research on Saturn, as Saturn is such an interesting one. As you know, it's an outer planet, which means that it moves more slowly than the inner planets, which means it has more of a lasting life effect upon each of us. And Saturn moves in 2.5 year cycles. So, well, it changes sign every 2.5 years. So it actually moves in like 28 to 30 year cycles. So we experience something called the Saturn return between the ages of 28 to 30, and then again around about the age of 58, and then again 28 years after that in your 80s. It's because not many people experience the third Saturn return that we don't talk about it as much as the other two. The first one is always usually the most significant one because this is a transition from not childhood to adulthood, but kind of gradually learning what it is that you're bringing to the world and taking on more responsibility. So a Saturn return can often signal that you will be taking on more responsibility. That is the crux of a Saturn return. How that shows up in your life will depend on which house your natal Saturn sits in. So for example, if it sits in the 10th house, then this will be how you're growing up and how your efforts or your lack of efforts up until that point in life have rewarded you. So in the 10th house, this is to do with career and status and how others, it's a very public placement. And your midheaven is the 10th house as well. So the midheaven is all about how you show up in the world and how you're recognized for your achievements by others just kind of naturally. So if you have Saturn in the 10th house as well, then this will be an area where you've worked extra hard. Like usually it could be an area where if you've ignored responsibility and the kind of the lessons over the years, then as we reach the Saturn return, it can be really challenging. And it usually is quite a challenging time for most people because it's often the area of life where we're most uncomfortable. So we don't like to look at it. But the trick with Saturn is that if we go with it, it really delivers the biggest gifts and literally the things that we've always dreamed of and always strive for and aimed for. So it's worth putting the effort in. And we've had Saturn in Capricorn, transiting Saturn in Capricorn, that is. So the planets that are moving around right now, not natally. So natally, we're all completely individual. Although Saturn is a generational thing, so it will hit, say, for example, everybody in your year group at school will very likely have the same Saturn sign, unless Saturn was changing within that year. And then you might find that they're in the next group. So many of my year group are Saturn in Scorpio, but I know that some of the people that are older in my year group have Saturn in Libra, just in the final degrees. So anyway, back to transiting Saturn. Saturn has been in Capricorn. Sorry, I keep looking away because it's like the way that I reconnect. The camera's so distracting, but it's the way that I reconnect with my intuition and like source energy, and that's kind of how the information keeps flowing. So bear with me. So Saturn in Capricorn has been very much lessons, restrictions, teachings on the structures we have within society. Saturn rules Capricorn. So in a way, it is comfortable here, but we have seen many themes of the world order the last few years, and especially this year, governments have had to really take charge and make plans, put things in place to help. Yeah. It depends how you look at all of these things and the virus and everything, but help protect, many would say help protect the population and do the best that they can to try and make sure that everybody is still safe. And that has meant imposing very, very tight restrictions. And what's really interesting is that because we're moving into Saturn in Aquarius this year, very, very soon actually, in these last couple of months, can't believe the year is nearly over. It's crazy. So much has happened. 2020 has been very memorable. One for the history books for sure, probably the biggest one in my lifetime. And because Saturn has been direct and retrograde, we had a moment earlier this year, in the second half of the year, but earlier than where we are now. And I can't remember the exact dates off the top of my head because I'm just doing this spontaneously. But anyway, that's enough of the technicalities. So earlier this year, we had Saturn move into Aquarius, which is very interesting because of all of the sudden social restrictions on groups, on interactions. Aquarius is, quite. I put a post up earlier on stories about Aquarius being quite a sociable, people zodiac sign. And Aquarians might not seem, some Aquarians might not seem people persons, friendly and relaxed, but it depends kind of how you term the word friendly. They are very friendly in the sense that they know how to make conversation, they know how to share information, and they are really interested in information. Sometimes I think the Aquarian, because it's an air sign, there's a lack of warmth. So if you find that you have lots of water signs, if your sun sign is as a water ruled sign, then you might find that you need some warmth with your information. You don't just need the cool, hard facts, which is how some Aquarians would communicate. But yeah, as we saw Saturn and restrictions on Aquarian type themes come into play, we saw, this real covering up with the masks, especially covering up of, our facial expressions and our social interactions. And actually, I think, I'm not the only person to say this, that I take lip reading as such a big thing in my day-to-day interactions, that if I can't see somebody's mouth moving, my focus in that social scenario, even if it's shopping or whatever, chatting when I'm walking the dog to a stranger, I find that it's so much more energy has to go into understanding what's being communicated. And I remember learning years ago that communication is maybe 10% the actual vocabulary that you're using. And this is why I've always been really interested in learning languages different to my own, because it's about gesticulation, and I've got South Node in Sag, so I'm really interested in travel. And for me, travel's a really comfortable thing, and I love to go far away, and I love to try and communicate. And I get such a thrill out of being able to communicate somehow and getting my point across in another language. And when I was at uni, I lived with a house full of Spanish people, and after a few months, it just started kind of going in, and I started to understand more so. And I think if you're just surrounded by communication, it starts to go in. But if we've got these masks and we've got physical boundaries, which is Capricorn, so this is like Saturn in Capricorn and moving into Saturn in Aquarius. If you've got the physical boundaries, the practical boundaries of a mask, masking the social interactions, then I think I've definitely I find myself being a bit more standoffish with people in the street now. I get nervous about being too close to people, social distancing. I mean, it's written everywhere, the signs are all there. Sorry, I'm just waiting for my son to come home, so I keep looking at the door as well. So I just think it's a really interesting time astrologically to keep an eye on the transits. I also find it really reassuring that it's in the stars. And after we've had our next 2.5 years, so I don't see social distancing ending anytime soon. I also don't see the masks ending anytime soon. I feel like more restrictions may come into play as we see Saturn and Aquarius interacting with the other transiting planets as well. And in 2.5 years' time, it will then be going into Pisces, which will bring up a whole new bunch of other themes, and it'll be like a whole new world that we're living in. I've said whole new world so many times this week and received so many memes of Aladdin.